Izumi Maya. The tale begins with a prologue image showing a beautiful blonde girl being held by a handsome man, while a dark-haired woman, Izumi, rests below them surrounded by floating sweets. The story then reveals its premise. The single, 33-year-old Izumi unexpectedly becomes this beautiful blonde princess. The story truly starts with Izumi Maya, a 33-year-old single woman, standing outside in the cold and snow. She has just finished work, as a closed sign is visible behind her, and she shivers as she walks up to her modest home. She unlocks her door, turns on the light, and hangs up her keys, reflecting on her life. Izumi admits that while she isn't actively trying to get married, it would be a lie to say she's not lonely. Inside her small apartment, which she calls my castle, she says, "I'm home," to an empty room. She immediately goes to the kitchen to warm up, filling her electric kettle with water. As she waits for the water to boil, which she notes will take 2 minutes, she reaches for a cute mug with a cat design on it. Since it is so chilly, she decides to make a special drink and pulls out a jar of honey, lemon, and ginger syrup. She spoons the syrup into the mug just as the kettle clicks, signaling the water is ready. She happily pours the hot water, enjoying her fancier-than-usual drink. Taking off her coat, she sips the warm drink and tells herself she has worked hard today. The drink warms her up, and she sets the mug down, feeling content. Her peace is interrupted when she spots her old flip phone on a bookshelf, realizing she left it there. She picks it up and opens it, only to find the screen filled with many notifications, all from Kosaka-senpai. A shocked, cartoonish version of Maya reads the messages. Kosaka-senpai had been trying to reach her, thinking she had forgotten her phone, and needed to talk to her about work. Maya immediately feels sorry and calls him back, looking nervous. But no one answers, and she figures he must be busy. The story then explains her jobs. Her main occupation is as a pâtissière, making fruit tarts in Ginza. But she also works a part-time job at night as a chef in a wine bar. This bar is actually managed by her former colleague, Kosaka-senpai, who had asked her if she was interested in cooking things other than sweets. She recalls how she loved the challenge of using available ingredients to match a customer's taste, finding the experience enjoyable, like a real-life game. Back in the present, she sips her drink and sighs, thinking that even though she loves it, the pay isn't very much. Since it is her day off, Maya decides to relax and focus on her meal, because for her, cooking is also a hobby. She rummages through her things and pulls out a large pot wrapped in newspaper, which she had prepared earlier. She proudly announces, "Tada," as she reveals her dinner, a pot of oden. While the oden heats up on the stove, she looks for something else to add and spots a radish and carrot. She excitedly decides to make kinpaira and starts peeling the vegetables, thinking about how hungry she is. Her preparations hit a snag when she checks the refrigerator. She searches past the ketchup and wasabi but realizes with horror that there is no mustard. To her, not having mustard with oden is like having pudding without caramel sauce. She can't let this happen, so she decides to go out and buy some. Maya bundles back up and steps out into the night, which is very dark. She uses her flip phone as a small light, wishing the street was better lit, and admits the night makes her feel uneasy. Pacing alone in the cold, she feels a sense of solitude as if she is out of place. She looks at the Tokyo cityscape and reflects on her life. She has been in the city for over 10 years, with no family left in her hometown, and feels this crowded city is the only place she can be herself. She has a job she enjoys and colleagues who are warm to her, and while she won't say she is lonely, she does not feel completely fulfilled. Despite everything, she smiles, concluding that no matter what, she is happy where she is. Just as she has this thought, a crosswalk light dings. Suddenly, she is blinded by a bright light, and her face is shown in total shock. Izumi's consciousness returns as she stares at an unknown, ornate ceiling painted with stars. Her first thought is that her own room does not have stars. She wonders if she was in an accident and is now in a hospital, or perhaps a deluxe suite. As she rises, her thoughts immediately go to her job, worrying if she left it unattended. But then she looks at her hands and is shocked to see they are much smaller. Her nails are also long, which they should not be, as she keeps them short for work. Confused, she slowly swings her legs over the side of the massive bed and is stunned to see how far away the floor is. She wonders in shock if she has shrunk. Looking around the opulent room, with its grand chandelier and curtains, she knows this is definitely not a hospital and maybe not even Japan. She looks at her small, childlike hands, unable to understand what is happening. She clutches her head as she tries to remember, thinking about that night, and wondering if she actually died in the accident. She gets out of bed, her mind racing. She still has all her memories, but this body is not Izumi Maya's. She wonders if this is reincarnation or just a dream she might wake up from. She walks barefoot across the room toward a large, ornate mirror. In the reflection, she sees a beautiful, angelic-looking blonde girl. At first, she thinks it is just a painting, but then she realizes it is a mirror. To test it, she pinches her cheeks, and the girl in the mirror does the same. She waves her hand, and the reflection waves back. The realization hits her, and she screams, "What?" In her shock, she stumbles backward and falls hard on the floor. The pain is real, and she starts to cry, realizing this is not a dream. The noise alerts people outside, who call out, "What was that noise?" and "Your Highness." As she sits on the floor, the full, absurd truth dawns on her. She, the single, 33-year-old Izumi Maya, has unexpectedly become a beautiful, blonde princess. Artheria Lucian Thea dis Elzevert Thadia. She explains her family background, showing a map of the land. Her father is Duke Elzevert, the fourth-generation duke from a country called Thadinia. Her mother was Princess Iphinia, who was the king's half-sister. Artheria herself has just turned 12 years old. She thinks about her new situation, looking distressed as an image of her former self. Izumi Maya winks with a peace sign, labeled, "Not Izumi Maya." Artheria realizes this is not a dream she will simply wake up from. As a door creaks open, a court lady named Lilia enters the room. Lilia sees that Her Highness is already awake and has changed her clothes. She asks if she should bring breakfast. Artheria, unable to speak, can only nod. Lilia asks again, and Artheria nods a second time. Lilia says, "As you wish," and leaves, shutting the door behind her. Artheria lets out a sigh of relief, wiping her forehead. She then recalls the confusion she felt when she first woke up in this world. She was so shocked that when the maids found her, they cried out, "Your Highness." In the flashback, the maids looked very concerned, asking if she was all right and noting that she was unconscious. They were also worried about her voice. The maids had put her back in bed, with one suggesting she rest. One maid ordered another to call for the doctor and to inform the crown prince and the duke. Nearby, two other maids were whispering. One said the accident must have happened while she was sleeping and guessed the princess was in shock about her voice. The other maid shushed her, saying they shouldn't gossip because the princess is the only one who can protect them. Artheria, peeking from under her blanket, overheard their conversation with interest. Back in the present, Artheria explains that she was officially diagnosed with aphonia caused by shock. She has remained quiet ever since to hide the fact that she is not the real Artheria. She thinks about how Maya, her old self, got into a car accident, while Artheria, the original owner of this body, also had an accident that resulted in amnesia. A dramatic close-up of her eye flashes as she remembers that after her accident, she was saved by her third stepbrother, which is how she woke up as this new person. She sits sadly, holding her arm which still shows bruises. She wonders if the real Artheria was truly saved, since her body is now inhabited by Izumi. She also reveals that she learned she was apparently about to be killed. Artheria then tries to get her new identity straight, starting with her long name, Artheria Lucian Thea dis Elzevert Thadia. She learns that in this world, a longer name signifies a higher status. Her name, which means shining from within a light, was given to her by her mother, who passed away right after she was born. She analyzes the name further, noting Thea refers to the royal family and dis means she is a princess consort. This leads to a shocking realization. She was married when she was only 7 months old. Her former 33-year-old unmarried self is now a frail, 12-year-old married girl. Her husband is His Highness Nigel Elspard Theodile Vera Dardai, and he is 27 years old, creating a 15-year age difference. He is the first crown prince and the future king. She realizes that as his future queen, she will have to be righteous. A family tree chart helps explain her complicated situation. She is the daughter of Duke Elzevert and his wife Iphinia. She has 5 older brothers and is the sole heir. The chart shows her marriage to Crown Prince Nigel and has an arrow pointing to her third brother, labeling him her lifesaver. A breakdown of her name shows her maiden name and her married name. She identifies a major problem. The Elzevert house has no successor other than her. With this information, she understands there is a very good reason for her life to be targeted. She concludes that many people must be after her, and what happened to her was not an accident but an attempted assassination of the crown princess. Just as she is processing this, Her stomach growls loudly as she hears the sound of a cart rolling. Breakfast is coming. She decides to eat first and worry about everything else later. A cart is rolled in and she says, "Bon appetit." As she stirs her drink, she thinks about how she was always alone in her previous life, so it is a huge shock to have a husband suddenly. She looks out her window at the imperial capital, Algrea, and wonders when she will get to meet him. Elsewhere, Deginia's first crown prince, His Highness Nigel, returns home. He is greeted by Viscount Rada, who asks about the banquet. Nigel replies that a part of Isekai is strongly opposing Deginia. He sits down and asks for a cup of tea. Rada obliges, thinking to himself that the prince is skipping a meal again. Rada quickly returns, apologizing for the wait as he sets down a cup and a small plate of food. While reading documents, Nigel absently picks up a piece of food and eats it. He wonders what that child, his one and only princess consort, is doing at this time. He sighs, but is interrupted by a frantic Viscount Rada. Nigel asks what is wrong. Rada explains that a report has just come in from Elzevert concerning the crown princess. He reports that she is in critical condition following an assassination attempt. Nigel stands up in shock. His expression immediately hardens, and he gives a direct order to find the culprit and apprehend them. A maid excuses herself from Arthuria's room. It has been a few days since Arthuria arrived in this new world, and while she is still learning about herself, she is certain of one thing: this world's desserts are absolutely delicious. A maid named Miridii soon brings her a plate of financiers and madeleines. Arthuria stares at them, thinking they look wonderful, which prompts the maid to ask if something is wrong. Miridii just smiles and encourages her to eat. Arthuria takes a bite of a green financier and is overcome with joy, believing the baker must be a genius. She notices a unique sweet aftertaste and learns from Miridii that it comes from a highly nutritional vegetable called zaid. Another maid, Julia, then brings a snack made from a regula carrot, which she explains doesn't taste like a normal carrot. Arthuria wonders if the original Arthuria disliked carrots but then worries she might have eaten too much. When Julia asks if she liked them, Arthuria nods enthusiastically, and the maid is pleased. After the maids leave, Lilia arrives to help Arthuria get ready for breakfast. Arthuria thinks she looks cute in her outfit. Lilia mentions that the head chef has prepared a special breakfast. However, Arthuria's expression sours when the food arrives. She knows the main cuisine in this country is stewed dishes, which do not suit her taste. She is served bland white fish and fatty pork stew, after having duck stew the day before. She finds the meat too tough and the smell too strong. As Lilia takes away the plate, Arthuria silently wishes she could just cook the meals herself, especially since the sweets are so good. At the next meal, a new maid named Ilucia, who serves as Arthuria's poison taster, is introduced. Ilucia presents a clam soup. Arthuria sips it and, as a former chef, thinks it's decent but lacking, noting it would be better with ginger and white wine. She nods to Ilucia that it suits her taste. While eating, Arthuria looks at her maids, thinking they are adorable and serve her earnestly, reminding her of her old juniors. This makes her think about the danger she is in and how it could affect them. She resolves to return to the royal palace to protect them and to figure out who she can trust. Just then, she bites down on something hard and chokes, realizing a piece of shell has cut her mouth. The maids panic, yelling for her to spit it out, and a guard bursts into the room. Later, Arthuria is exhausted in bed, having been forced to throw up everything. Lilia asks about her condition, and Arthuria just nods. She looks around, wondering where Lilia went. A tearful Julia explains that Lilia is being interrogated as a suspect in a poisoning case. Arthuria is shocked, knowing it wasn't poison. Lilia returns, addressing Arthuria as Your Majesty, and reports that Ilucia has passed away. The poison, believed to be a slow-acting one, was in the breakfast Ilucia had tasted earlier. Arthuria is horrified, realizing that if she hadn't choked on the shell, she would be the one who is dead. She breaks down, apologizing to Ilucia. Lilia comforts her, saying Ilucia was lucky to have protected her queen. Arthuria vows to remember her. This event solidifies her resolve. She understands death is close and this was a real assassination attempt. She stands and declares she is going back to the royal palace, and Lilia kneels in agreement. Arthuria confronts her father, Duke Elzevert, stating her intention to leave. The Duke protests, arguing it's too dangerous right after an assassination attempt and that the regular guards are not enough. He asks if she is doubting her own family, the Elzeverts. Artheria looks at his blue eyes, realizing she inherited them, and assures him she is not. The Duke relents and agrees to let his son, her half-brother, guard her on the journey. Artheria accepts the terms. During the carriage journey, a wheel suddenly breaks, forcing the group to make camp for the night. Artheria is surprisingly excited about camping. As a maid named Alice prepares a green pheasant soup, she cuts her finger. Artheria, a chef in her past life, seizes the opportunity and declares she will make the meal, saying she wants to cook and knows a recipe from a book to warm the body. She immediately takes charge, ordering knights to get water and maids to peel potatoes and slice vegetables. She gives detailed instructions for preparing the pheasant meat with wine and salt, making a miso base with ginger, and having knights sauté peppers and more ginger. She is briefly disturbed to find the knights are stirring the pot with the shaved axle shaft of the broken wheel, but decides it's not worth fighting. As the soup cooks, a knight adds the meat and splashes hot liquid, causing the other knights to panic about being punished. Artheria just smiles, assuring them she is fine and that she is simply happy to be cooking with everyone. The maids note how good it smells and say the crown prince would surely love her handmade dish. This makes Artheria wonder what her husband is like. The maids describe him as absolute perfection, handsome, tall, kind, skilled with a sword, and a political genius since childhood. Artheria is terrified by this description of her husband. The soup is finally finished. Everyone eats, and they are amazed, cheering that it's delicious and warms the body. A handsome guard compliments the dish and asks where it's from. Artheria explains the ginger is to warm the body, noticing he looks like her father. This guard, who mentions his older brother, makes Artheria wonder if he is her third brother, the one who saved her. As the group eats together, Artheria smiles, thinking it's delicious to eat with everyone. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Prince Nigel is in a meeting. He asks a flustered council member named Raymond for a report on the incident, but Raymond has been busy with the budget and knows nothing. Nigel sighs and explains that the crown princess is under threat. He details the original assassination attempt. She was pushed from a third-floor window into the pond, which had its frozen surface cracked in advance. This happened despite him assigning over 50 guards to her. He confirms that his wife has recovered from her coma, but she now has amnesia. He smirks, thinking she probably wants to forget that, and decides that letting her forget is a kindness. He concludes he will not let her out of the palace for a while. The capital city, Algrea, where Princess Artheria is greeted one morning by her maid, Lilia. Lilia asks if she slept well and then delivers the day's schedule, announcing that after Artheria greets His Majesty about her return, she is scheduled to have tea with the crown prince. Lilia adds that this will be her very first meeting with her husband, which causes Artheria to shout in shock. As the maids help her get dressed, Artheria becomes increasingly nervous, feeling that her heart is just not ready for this, and she thinks about how she is internally a 33-year-old single woman. Lilia asks if she is worried and then cheerfully adds that the tea time is scheduled for only the two of them, wishing her good luck. This only makes Artheria more scared, and she explains that she is worried because everyone she asks insists the prince is a kind person, which she feels is the same as being unkind to everyone. While Lilia powders her face, Artheria nervously asks if the crown prince has a mistress or concubine, or if he likes men, or even has a Lolita complex. She immediately dismisses these ideas as impossible, and Lilia confirms he has neither, as he always said one wife is enough. Lilia explains that while the current king has 4 wives and mistresses and princes are allowed to have mistresses on the side, Prince Nigel, shown with a stoic expression, has no women involved with him at all. This fact worries Artheria, who finds it strange for a healthy 27-year-old man. Lilia notes that the princess's confusion confirms her amnesia, as the previous Artheria was always quiet and kept a blank expression, even during dangerous events like an attempted kidnapping or a horse incident. This makes Artheria think she must have been just like a doll princess. Lilia reassures the princess, holding her arm and saying she believes her body will remember the standard greeting protocols, though she warns her not to make a mistake in the greeting order. Artheria clenches her fists and agrees to try her best. As Lilia pulls back a curtain, she admits she is actually happy with the princess's new personality and thinks it's for the best if the amnesia is what caused this change. Artheria thanks her, and as the large doors open, she reassures herself that she will be fine because the current me is not alone anymore. After passing by a royal family tree diagram, Artheria enters a grand hall and is immediately struck by an incredibly intense and scary glare. She is terrified, thinking that if a look could kill, she would be dead by now. She quickly identifies the source of the glare as the man standing there, her husband, Crown Prince Nigel. She panics, wondering if she did something to anger him and why he has such animosity on their very first meeting. The king, Gladys, smiles warmly and welcomes Thea back, saying she has done well. Artheria performs a perfect curtsy, announcing her full name, Artheria Lucianthea dis Elzevert Thaddeus, and her safe return to the palace. She thanks him very much, and the king tells her he heard about her maid's death, calling it an unfortunate incident, but instructs her to forget about it and that she will be safe in the royal palace. Next, the first Queen Yulia speaks, noting Artheria has been through a scary experience and asking if she is feeling all right now. Artheria replies that she has recovered and thanks her for her concern. She internally notes that this first queen supports the fussy king and that Prince Nigel seems very similar to his mother. She also feels scared of the queen's intimidating beauty, just as she feels his intense glare on her again. In an instant, the prince's expression changes, and he is suddenly giving her a perfect, empty smile as he welcomes Thea back. This rapid switch from anger to a flawless public mask terrifies Artheria even more. She formally greets him, saying she has returned, and he continues to smile, saying a lot has happened but her well-being is what matters. He then asks if her memories have recovered. Artheria, wondering if he was angry because she made him worry, replies that while she doesn't remember many things, there is no trouble at all, and she sadly concludes he must not have any real feelings for her. He just asks, "Is that all?" and then states that they will have tea together, alone, after this, where he will save their conversation for then. The king thinks this is excellent, remarking that Thea won't be a child forever, and encourages them to spend lots of time together. Prince Nigel cuts the greeting short, announcing to the king that they will excuse themselves. As he steps away and looms over her, Artheria panics, thinking she doesn't want such a handsome and extraordinary genius for a husband. She tries to protest, saying she wants to stay, but he simply lifts her up into a princess carry. With her feet floating off the ground and the king laughing in the background, Nigel carries her out of the room, excusing themselves. They arrive in a private room where the atmosphere is awful, and it's completely silent as he puts her down and tea is poured. The prince finally breaks the silence by asking if she has stopped putting milk in her tea. Artheria, examining her cup, is impressed, identifying the tea as a high-quality Sagia first pick. She notes it's easy to drink, thinks it must be tasted as is, and considers that it would be delicious in a pound cake or cookies. Nigel confirms the tea is from one of his territories. A slice of pie is then served, and Artheria takes a bite, only to be deeply disappointed. She mentally grades it 50 points, noting the apples are overcooked and have changed color, and they didn't add any cinnamon. She finds this strange, as the royal pâtissier should be a professional and the snack she had last time was good. As she gets lost in her own thoughts, planning all the dishes she could make with the right equipment, like hot cakes, stews, or even chocolate if it exists here, the prince's voice cuts in, asking if the pie does not suit her taste. Startled, Artheria's gaze meets his. He simply says he will have the cooks improve it. He then observes her, noting that if his memory is correct, this is the first time she has ever met his gaze by her own will. He remarks that he had heard reports of her change but didn't believe it until now, and that she has become a lot more human in that time. Artheria is stunned, wondering if this coercive way of speaking is his true self. He continues, admitting he isn't good with children and knows he isn't the type to be liked by them, but says he will be troubled if she can't get used to him, because she is his wife. When he calls her name to get her attention, she timidly asks him not to be mad. He denies being mad, but she thinks he's a liar, because he sounds angry. He then retorts that she is the one who made him mad. Confused, she points out he just said he wasn't mad, which causes him to turn away with a thumph. As he does, Artheria spots his ear, which is bright red. This makes her realize he might not be so scary after all, and she decides to try her best to get used to him, hoping the uncomfortable feeling will fade. She asks him to please speak normally, as his loud or harsh voice makes her unable to say anything, but he just says this is his normal way of speaking. She agrees to pay attention from now on. The next morning, during their tea, she is served the Sagia tea straight. Alice had proudly told her it was a present from the crown prince. Artheria reflects that he yielded to her request, and she admits she may have been too prejudiced before, deciding he is actually just a very frank person. Meanwhile, in his office, Prince Nigel is working early when Counsel Phil Lynn arrives, teasing him for being at his desk so soon. Nigel, without looking up, just says, "It's you who's late." Phil gives him a shoulder massage and asks how it went with his bride, noting her amnesia. Nigel confirms she has no major injuries and has arrived safely, but says he is deeply concerned and thinking about what it means for her memories to be gone. He feels she has become a different person. Phil then hands him a document, calling it a present. It's a summary of the assassination attempt on the princess, covering both the falling incident and the poisoning. Phil asks if they have the culprit in custody, but he replies with a smile that while one of them seemed to be cornered, they unfortunately lost them. Nigel glares, vowing he can't make the same mistake a second time, and says they lost them, forever, that is. He then gives a direct order to review the guard setup for the princess consort's palace and to tighten the patrol in the corridors, ensuring there are no flaws. Artheria looking in the mirror, first with her hair down in gentle waves and then holding it up in pigtails. She blushes, admitting to herself that she is cute. From the doorway, Lilia peeks in with a shocked look, which then melts into a blushing smile as she also thinks, cute. Shows Counsel Phil Lin entering Prince Nigel's office and calling his name, only to find the room empty. Phil then sits at the prince's desk and gleefully mimics him, striking a pose and saying, "I order you to capture the culprit as soon as possible." He is seen from the doorway by Nigel, who looks completely shocked and annoyed at the display. Two maids ask Lilia if they can be excused from their duties. Lilia, with her back to them, simply says, "No," telling them the floor hasn't been polished enough. The maids protest that they already polished it, but Lilia is unmoved. She then lifts up an exclusive childhood photo of Prince Nigel and announces she will give it to the person who polishes the floor the best. Immediately, the two maids begin polishing the floor with intense speed and energy. As the narration explains, this is how the palace is kept so beautiful. Princess Artheria dressed in simple clothes and tying up her hair, catching her maid Lilia by surprise. Lilia looks concerned and asks if something is the matter, noting the unusual choice of clothing. Artheria just smiles and says it's all right, explaining she only wanted to tidy up the reading room. She then clarifies that her true mission isn't just a big cleaning, it's actually a search. She is looking for a diary, hoping it will help her understand the previous Artheria's thought process and perhaps help her remember things she has forgotten. After imagining finding it, she realizes there isn't one in her current room and figures the place with the highest possibility must be the reading room, which is described as having a book collection like a mini-library. Inside the reading room, Artheria looks over the many books on the shelves, reflecting that judging from the collection, she feels she can understand the person who owned them more. She contrasts this with her past life as Maya, whose bookcases only held work-related books. The shelves here are filled with diverse titles, including French books, various recipe books, Bibles, food composition tables, and even books on Buddhism. Lilia, standing nearby, confirms she's thinking of the previous princess and recalls that the princess rarely talked or wished for anything, but books were the only thing she really asked for. As Lilia speaks, Artheria's thoughts drift, wondering who took care of her, Maya's, belongings after her death. This thought leads Artheria to reflect on her past life, remembering she had no parents or siblings and no close friends or relatives. She muses that her current self is alone, but her previous self was also a person without a single relative. She briefly wonders about her own funeral before Lilia interrupts, asking if something is wrong. Artheria brushes it off, saying she should have thought about it more. Back in the reading room, Artheria marvels at the sheer number of books, thinking it was amazing for her previous self to have read so many, noting they are full of writing. Lilia asks what she's thinking, but Artheria just says it's nothing. Lilia then comments that she was just admiring how neatly everything was kept and how the princess never stained or made a mess of the books. Artheria, flipping through a volume, replies, "Well, of course," as Lilia adds that Her Highness kept this a secret. Lilia then reveals a surprising truth. The books in this collection are actually meant for university students. Artheria is visibly stunned, processing that Lilia means this world's university. Lilia explains that the university here is an extremely high-class and specialized academic facility, making it incredibly difficult to get into and even harder to graduate from. Lilia proudly mentions that her own husband, Prince Nigel, received the Vela title given to graduates, an honor no other prince on the continent currently holds. Artheria is left to absorb this, thinking it must be an amazing thing even if she can't fully grasp it. Lilia continues, revealing that Artheria's own home tutor, Professor Lehigh, had recommended she apply to the university in the future. The professor apparently said that at her current pace, it would be no problem at all. This news shocks Artheria, who wonders aloud if she is really that smart. Lilia quickly reassures her not to worry, explaining that it's impossible now and that, in any case, it wasn't considered necessary for a princess to study to that level. Only the professor, Lilia herself, and Lucia knew about her advanced studies. Lilia explains that for women, especially those of high status, it was not expected for them to have knowledge exceeding their education, as a woman's primary duty was considered to be bearing a child. Hearing the name, Artheria repeats, Lucia? Lilia clarifies that Lucia had a cousin working in the archive department who taught her about books, including how to mend them. Lucia had limited knowledge but could understand some old languages and was even helping the princess with manuscripts, unlike the rest of the maids who weren't adept at reading or writing. They move to another part of the library, which Lilia confirms is the fiction section. Lilia giggles and points to a specific book, Eyes of Sky, saying it was one the princess especially liked and had read many times. Artheria is surprised to learn her previous self read popular romance novels. Lilia explains that Duke Elzevert sends them periodically and that this particular one is a dramatic romance that continues endlessly. She mentions there are 50 volumes available right now, and Artheria is shocked it's not completed. Lilia adds that the princess's love for the series became known, so the Duke sent every volume. Artheria decides to save that book for reading later and asks Lilia to set it aside. She continues to wander but still can't find anything that looks like a diary. She pulls another book from the shelf, wondering where she would hide a diary if she were her past self. Suddenly, she spots a book with Diary, or Bry, on the cover and thinks she's finally found it. Lilia notices her excitement and asks if something is wrong, but Artheria, saying it's nothing, opens the book. She eagerly hopes to find clues, but her face falls when she sees the contents. It's not a diary but a detailed daily schedule, listing wake-up times, breakfast, audiences, lessons, lunch, dance, law, embroidery, dinner, and sleep. This is not what she wanted at all. But as she looks closer, she finds something else tucked inside. She recognizes the handwriting. It belongs to the prince. It's a short note wishing her a happy birthday, asking if she is doing well, and suggesting they have tea again later. Artheria holds the note, signed Ban, and looks at Prince Nigel's name. She realizes that it wasn't like there was nothing between the two of them after all. She remarks on how rare it is to see his handwriting and immediately decides she should send a return gift for the tea he sent her. Filled with new resolve, she turns to Lilia and asks to borrow the kitchen, declaring she wants to bake some cookies. Lilia looks flustered and bluntly asks if Her Highness even knows how to make cookies. Artheria hesitates and replies with a shy, maybe. Lilia insists that baking should be left to the cooks and that the princess must not act alone. Artheria asks what the problem is, and Lilia relents, saying she will try her best to grant the wish, to which Artheria agrees. The scene then changes. Lilia is shown meeting someone in secret, addressing him as Your Grace. The man is revealed to be His Grace, Cheyenne, the ex-third prince and an archbishop, who greets her as Lilia. He apologizes for the wait and confirms her suspicion that he came secretly, asking her to keep the meeting quiet. Cheyenne smiles warmly, saying it's good to see her in good health and noting that she hasn't changed. He playfully asks if she's eating properly and not being picky. Lilia bows, congratulating him on his new appointment in the capital and observing it's been 3 years since they last met. She thanks him but politely asks him to stop calling her Your Grace. Cheyenne agrees, saying he will use Cheyenne-sama instead as she pardons herself. Cheyenne then muses to himself, wondering if his appointment as capital archbishop was his older brother's idea. His attendant suggests his brother has faith in him, but Cheyenne thinks his brother trusts him but doesn't truly rely on him. Lilia smiles, saying that can't be helped, as Cheyenne-sama has always been a willful and spoiled child because he's the youngest. Cheyenne's attention is then drawn to the basket Lilia is carrying, and he asks what's inside. Lilia replies that it's from the princess. Lilia confirms it's from Princess Artheria, who she is currently serving. She explains that when she told the princess she was meeting Cheyenne-sama, the princess gave her this basket. Cheyenne looks surprised as Lilia explains it's a snack. This is because the princess has recently developed an interest in making sweets. Cheyenne looks skeptical, asking if it's even edible. Lilia encourages him to try some, teasing that he has such a sweet tooth he would instantly want to propose to the baker after eating it. Lilia first offers him a warm drink, explaining that the princess even made a special cover to keep the heat in. Cheyenne asks what it is, and Lilia tells him the princess called it chai. She says it's something the princess found in an old book and then adapted to fit Dardinia's taste. Cheyenne takes a sip and his eyes widen slightly. It's delicious. Next, Lilia offers him cookies and pancake sandwiches. Cheyenne looks curiously at the pancake sandwich. Lilia explains that the princess made small pancakes and put cream between them. Cheyenne takes a bite and is clearly impressed. He notes that the cream flavor is different. Lilia smiles, reminding him of her joke. Cheyenne concedes that it's quite an amazing feat and jokes that it really does make him want to propose, adding that the princess is too good for his brother. Both Cheyenne and Lilia smile, enjoying the moment. Cheyenne admits he just loves sweets and accepts another cookie and more chai. Lilia's attendant asks what's so funny, and Lilia, smiling, says it's nothing, just that it's been a while since she's seen that happy expression on Cheyenne's face. Cheyenne gladly accepts the rest of the snacks as Lilia explains she already had some while the princess was baking. But then Lilia sighs, saying it's a pity. She asks Cheyenne to keep it a secret that the princess made them, explaining that Her Highness was personally in the kitchen and that her brother, Prince Nigel, would likely scold her if he found out. Cheyenne asks if it was really so unusual. Lilia confirms it was, and what's worse, the head chef saw the princess in her disguise and thought they had simply employed a new maid. A small image shows Artheria thinking that this definitely makes the situation worse. The mood darkens. Cheyenne tells Lilia that he is leaving the princess in her care. Lilia acknowledges that this was a one-time thing, and if something had happened, they would not have gotten away without consequences. Cheyenne's expression becomes grave as he warns Lilia that if anything were to happen to Princess Artheria, it would plunge Dardinia into a civil war. Lilia quietly says she understands. She then calls his name, Cheyenne-sama, and he asks what is it. Lilia asks if he will still refuse to tell her anything. She then reveals that she knows the poison used to kill Alicia was the same type that killed his mother. Cheyenne simply says he's sorry and warns Lilia not to go looking for trouble. Lilia relents, saying it's all right and that she won't force him, as he must have a reason for his silence. Cheyenne suddenly grabs her arm, warning her that it's truly dangerous and pleading with her not to get any closer to Princess Artheria. Lilia stands firm, insisting she won't do anything dangerous. Gently pulling her arm away, Lilia tells Cheyenne that she still thinks of him as an important person and that he is her foster sister, as a note explains her mother also breastfed him. However, she states clearly that her current master is Princess Artheria. Cheyenne asks if the princess is reckless. Lilia replies, yes, and that the princess is even more reckless than Cheyenne-sama himself. She adds that perhaps because of the memory loss, the princess seems strangely energetic. Cheyenne observes that the princess has changed a lot. Lilia agrees but suggests that maybe that's not the case. She says the princess is simply the princess, just as Cheyenne-sama is not just a prince or an archbishop, but simply Cheyenne-sama. Cheyenne reflects on this, suggesting that by losing her memories, the princess may have broken the chains that bound her and that it's possible this new personality is her true self. He says he sees and that, at this point, the memory loss itself doesn't really matter anymore. Cheyenne then says Lilia's name and mentions he should be heading back. As he turns to leave, Lilia asks him a final question. Does Cheyenne-sama believe in God? His answer is a definitive no. He elaborates, stating he doesn't believe in God. He says God is nowhere to be found, and that the only thing that exists is his own prayer. Princess Artheria looks up in surprise, questioning the name Elzevelt. Her maid, Lilia, confirms that a messenger has indeed come from Elzevelt. Lilia then asks if they should handle the visitor in the usual manner, but Artheria, with a thoughtful expression, decides against it and says she will also meet with him. A well-dressed, blonde-haired man stands bowing deeply in the audience chamber, expressing just how honored he is to be granted a meeting with the princess. As Artheria sees him, she has a sudden moment of recognition. A memory flashes in her mind of the same man smiling while wearing a fur-collared cloak, and she realizes he is the older brother who helped her before. Artheria continues to stare at the visitor, internally debating if he is really her older stepbrother and if she should be thanking him for saving her. She desperately tries to get Lilia's attention, mentally pleading for her to look so she can find out who he is. Taking the initiative, Artheria beams at him and thanks him for his help the other day. Sir Rael is visibly taken aback, his eyes widening in surprise. As Artheria internally celebrates, confirming he was indeed her rescuer, Lilia formally introduces him as Sir Rael Crow's Six Phenos, Artheria's older stepbrother. Lilia elaborates that the princess has been wanting to thank him for saving her from the lake and for escorting her safely back to the royal capital. Sir Rael humbly replies that her words of thanks are more than he deserves. He then presents the gifts he has brought, explaining that goods have been delivered from Elzevelt. The gifts include local specialties like honey and fruit liqueur, along with books, fabrics, and sugar. Arthuria's attention is immediately captured by the books, specifically the new installment of The Eye of the Sky. She reflects that after reading the series, she completely understands why her past self was so fond of it. Sir Rail simply says, "Thank you," looking pleased himself as he notes that the most important thing is that the princess is happy with the gifts. While holding the book, Arthuria's mind wanders. She recalls that the hero of the story, a foreign king, strongly resembles Prince Nigel, sharing his silver hair, blue eyes, and calm demeanor. She guesses the previous Arthuria must have admired the main character, who was bold in announcing her love for this king, but Arthuria herself feels a disconnect, unable to remember what such feelings were like. An attendant then asks if Her Royal Highness has any other requests, mentioning that the Duke was worried she might be feeling uncomfortable. Arthuria's face lights up as she replies that she would love to eat the sweets she tried at Elzevelt Castle again. She enthusiastically recalls how delicious they were, thinking to herself that they were so good, people in her former world would have lined up for them. Sir Rail seems a bit surprised, asking if she enjoys sweet things. As she smiles and confirms, yes, Arthuria reflects internally. She reasons that calling him older brother in her head is just a convenient label and that she probably never addressed him that way before. She doesn't really consider him a blood relative, but she decides she likes people who aren't concerned with such things when forming relationships. Besides, delicious sweets simply make her happy. Later, Arthuria is shown in a room piled high with all the gifts from Elzevelt. She looks a bit overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fabric, ribbons, books, and liqueur bottles, stammering, this is... From off-panel, Sir Rail is heard thinking how cute she looks, musing that her appearance makes her seem so young, even though he knows she is mentally the older one. Lilia happily announces that these are the gifts from Elzevelt. Arthuria, clutching the Eye of the Sky installment, feels completely satisfied with just this one item. Lilia then draws the princess's attention to a large spool of decorative ribbon, pointing out how super elaborate the pattern is. Arthuria agrees that it's very pretty and observes that there is an awful lot of it. The maids are all excited by the gifts, with one exclaiming, "Wow," as she holds up a bolt of fabric, urging the princess to look at its splendid weave. She identifies it as the work of Nalek, just as one would expect from Elzevelt. Arthuria, unfamiliar with the name, just repeats, "Nalek." Seeing her maid's excitement over the ribbons, Arthuria generously tells them they can each pick 2 rolls they like, and the delighted maids thank her profusely before being instructed to put the rest away. Lilia clarifies that Nalek is currently the most fashionable textile workshop. She explains that Elzevelt is renowned as a protector of the arts, and workshops like Nalek gain their fame through the patronage of the Duke's house. Lilia mentions that each of the 4 great Archduke families is known for a specific trait, Alhain for its military, Grashis for wisdom, Feldis for commerce, and Elzevelt for its beauty. As Lilia speaks, a map illustrates the territories, and Arthuria thoughtfully repeats, "Elzevelt's beauty." Arthuria observes that there were no accessories included in the gifts. Lilia explains that such ornamental items are typically worn only after the Corolla ceremony. Arthuria, looking a bit weary, asks what that is, and Lilia clarifies it's a rite of passage for noble daughters, marking their entry into adulthood. Noticing the princess's fatigue, Lilia asks if she is tired, and Arthuria admits she is a little. Lilia reassures her, saying that after her ceremony, her accessories will surely be amazing. Arthuria muses that 13 years old seems a bit early for this, but Lilia explains that in her specific case, it is the crown prince's wish to proceed with the official wedding ceremony swiftly after she comes of age. As the maids begin carrying the gifts away, with one noting they'll take the honey and liqueurs to the kitchen, Arthuria suddenly stops them. She instructs them to leave those items behind, much to the confusion of Lilia and the other maids. Arthuria then points to a small nearby room and declares her intention to turn it into a manufacturing room. Lilia looks baffled and asks the princess what she is doing. Arthuria begins giving orders, telling the maids to move the chairs and paintings elsewhere and to remove the rug, though they can leave the large table. She explains that since cleaning rugs is so difficult, she thought they might as well take this opportunity to convert the room into a manufacturing space specifically for making sweets. Arthuria then smiles at Lilia, asking if it's all right for her to bake sweets at another time. She explains her plan to send sweets to everyone, adding that she'll include the crown prince in that as well. The maids, especially Lilia, look crowded and alarmed. Lilia replies, yes, but immediately insists that the crown prince should be her highest priority. This makes Artheria sweat drop and meekly reply, yes. After a serious pause, Lilia directly asks the princess what she thinks of His Highness, the Crown Prince. When Artheria asks what she means, Lilia clarifies the question, do you like him? Lilia continues to probe, asking if Artheria at least doesn't hate him, even if he is scary. Artheria confirms this, explaining that while she has thought he was frightening, she doesn't particularly hate him. She feels she simply doesn't know him well enough yet to say whether she likes or dislikes him. In fact, she muses, he might be an unexpectedly nice person, noting that the considerate prince has invited her to tea many times. A vision of the prince flashes in her mind as she concludes that what's really scary is how much she still doesn't understand. With her hand over her heart, Artheria confesses that despite all this, her chest hurts whenever she is with him, a pain she is sure belongs to the original Artheria's heart. She then asks Lilia why she brought this up. Lilia explains she wants Her Royal Highness to build a good relationship with the Crown Prince, to which Artheria agrees, stating that they are a couple after all. Lilia then offers to actively create more opportunities for the two of them to spend time together. When Artheria asks why, Lilia bluntly states that it is so she can catch the Crown Prince's heart, which Lilia believes will increase the princess's own safety. Artheria questions this, asking if Lilia means she needs more safety than she currently has. Lilia counters by asking if the princess understands the difference between someone protecting her out of duty versus an active will to do so, adding that there are no downsides to being good friends with the prince. Lilia does admit that since returning to the palace, nothing bad has happened, and there have been no incidents that directly caused the princess harm. Artheria privately muses that as a husband he isn't bad, and as a higher-up, he's actually quite good, though she'd prefer not to think about romance. Lilia agrees with the princess's assessment, stating that an incident like the one at Elzevelt probably won't occur at the palace. This line of thinking makes Artheria uncomfortable, as she feels it bluntly frames her as a type of possession. Lilia softens her gaze and says that she truly wishes for the princess to find happiness. Artheria reflects on this, realizing that her health and daily safety seem to depend entirely on the Crown Prince's will, as a dark silhouette of him appears in her mind. Artheria points out that even so, her options for catching his heart are limited. She is still a child and can't make any drastic moves. Lilia, however, starts scheming with her eyes closed, musing that while it's impossible for the princess to visit his bedroom, and getting him drunk is also out since he can handle his alcohol. Artheria is appalled, pleading for Lilia to stop contemplating such frightening ideas, yelling that they are totally impossible. Lilia finishes her thought by reminding the princess that she doesn't have the option to choose any other man anyway. Artheria resolves to just start with the one thing she knows she can do, thinking of the prince's face. She believes that people will automatically smile when they eat delicious food, and she wants to see that kind of expression on the Crown Prince's face. Therefore, the one thing she can do is make him sweets. She decides to start by simply supplying him with snacks every day. She thinks this is a nice idea, and remembering Lilia's advice to be discreet, she mentally dubs this her secret strategy to feed His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. Elsewhere, Prince Nigel is at his desk when Cheyenne leans over a chair, mentioning that he heard Nigel gave permission for Elzevelt to meet with his wife. Nigel continues his work, replying coolly that if it is something she wishes to do, he cannot stop her. Cheyenne laments that this is no fun, though he also points out it's a good chance to probe the Duke of the East. Nigel dismisses the comment, stating that this situation isn't about fun. Cheyenne presses, asking why the princess would choose to meet them now. Nigel simply replies, "Who knows?" prompting Cheyenne to ask if that's an acceptable answer. Nigel then clarifies his thinking. The visitor was the third son, and for the princess with her memory loss, this would essentially be their first meeting, even if he is her stepbrother. This means her decision wasn't based on any past kindness. Nigel looks down at his papers and states firmly that he will never allow that young girl to be used. Cheyenne then questions Nigel's own approach, asking if he plans to act like her older brother, and points out that Nigel's way of dealing with younger sisters is definitely not good. Nigel defends his strategy, explaining that he is more than double her age and she can't possibly understand what a husband is. His plan is to respect her wishes and try to build intimacy starting from the level of housemates, though he admits he has no idea what a young girl thinks. Cheyenne suddenly shouts, "Wait a minute," telling Nigel that his doll princess feelings might be a mystery, but a 12-year-old girl is already a woman and not as immature as he believes. He insists that starting as housemates is way too slow. Cheyenne passionately argues that Nigel's housemate plan is not good at all. He insists that Nigel is her husband and he must not tear down that boundary. He advises that while Nigel should be kind, he absolutely must give up acting like a father or older brother. As Nigel just stares back at him, clearly confused, Cheyenne accuses him of demanding surprisingly difficult things without having any practice. Nigel can only reply quietly, "It's not good, huh?" Nigel looks perplexed and asks what Cheyenne means. Cheyenne puts a hand to his face in exasperation, lamenting that they're starting from that point and that Nigel's grim prospects are making him dizzy. Nigel honestly confesses that he has no idea how to connect with the princess. He had planned to just slowly sort through things he could understand about her and build a connection little by little. Looking completely worried about Nigel's future, Cheyenne sighs and offers some advice. He tells the Crown Prince to just read a popular romance novel to use as a reference. He quickly adds a warning for him to choose a story with legitimate mutual love, not an inappropriate one. Princess Artheria is absolutely overjoyed, exclaiming, "Tada!" as she looks around her very own workshop. She is happy that it's not just a kitchen, but her own dedicated space. Lilia smiles, confirming that they made sure to collect all the things she would need, little by little. Just then, Sir Vixem and Sir Reyes are seen carrying in the baking ingredients. Artheria thanks them, feeling relieved that in this private room, she doesn't have to worry about anyone watching her or about the cleanup afterwards. When Lilia asks what she plans to make, Artheria happily announces she will be baking pound cakes. One of the other maids, Meridii, shyly asks if it's okay for them to eat any of the cakes that happen to get burnt. Lilia smiles and mentions that the girls from the main palace are quite jealous and would also love to try the princess's baking. Artheria generously agrees, saying that it's fine and she'll make sure Julia and Meridii get some too. She also wants to make enough to share with all the guards as a way to thank them for their daily work. The maids are thrilled, thanking the princess, and Artheria asks for their enthusiastic help. As they prepare, Artheria reflects on what she's learned about the palace. It seems that, for the first time, serving in the Crown Princess's palace has become something to be envied. This is a stark contrast to the Crown Prince's West Palace, which is known as the most demanding residence in the royal palaces. Lilia had told her that the staff changes there are frequent and fervent. This is because His Highness, the Crown Prince, values silence deeply. A flashback image shows a butler furiously scolding a terrified maid who has dropped and shattered a teacup, demanding to know what she is doing. The maid offers her humblest apologies, while the prince, Nigel, sits nearby, looking extremely displeased. The thoughts continue, recalling that the prince is also said to hate the smell of cosmetics. If any scent of perfume wafts into his vicinity, he becomes extremely displeased. Furthermore, while he isn't known to be picky about his food, if the tea or coffee served doesn't suit his taste, he will refuse to touch any of the food afterwards and simply order the staff to clear it all away. Artheria recalls that Lilia learned these stories from gossip among the kitchen cooks. Lilia had also shared her opinion that the people working in that kitchen aren't very good characters and was shocked to see them smoking inside the kitchen. Artheria agrees, thinking to herself that smoking in a kitchen is terrible, as it would disrupt their sense of taste and make their hands smell. She also remembers Lilia wondering if the prince's silent pressure is actually scarier than a direct complaint, since a complaint at least gives a person a chance to fix their mistake. This leads Artheria to wonder if the cook's skills remain poor simply because the Crown Prince doesn't seem to care about the food. Perhaps the food isn't actually delicious, and his staple diet consists of provisions he carries on his person. Lilia had confirmed that the Crown Prince's cooks aren't very skilled, which is why the maids in his palace, like Alice, look forward to eating in the main palace. Artheria muses that she doesn't know which is the cause and which is the effect. She concludes, as I thought, that she has no power to file complaints about the cooks in the Crown Prince's palace. She wishes she had the authority to go in and make them clean every corner. She asks Lilia for confirmation, and Lilia affirms that it's impossible. Because they are not the princess's cooks, she has no authority to dismiss them. Artheria expected as much. Lilia then cheerfully brings the conversation back to the task at hand, reminding the princess she's making pound cake. With renewed spirits, Artheria gets ready. The ingredients are all laid out: flour, butter, eggs, and milk, along with sugar and honey. She notes that various nuts and dried fruits are essential, and they have 3 kinds: apricots, prunes, and grapes. They also have a special jar from yesterday containing lemons covered in honey and dried fruits soaked in brandy. She observes that the baking pan they are using is for a bread loaf, which works because the bread in this world is smaller than what she's used to, making the pan suitable for pound cakes. Artheria begins by asking for 3 kilos of flour. The guard, Reyes, confirms the large amount. She explains that while it seems like a lot, it's better to make a large quantity at once, as the baking times for the cakes can be irregular. She then asks Lilia if the prince likes brandy. Lilia smiles, confirming that he has a strong tolerance for alcohol and enjoys it. Artheria is delighted and decides that His Highness's share will be made with ingredients that bring out the taste of the brandy. Miridii then informs the princess that she has successfully arranged for them to use one of the ovens all day long. Artheria thanks her and declares that this means she'll be able to give the most perfectly baked cake to His Highness. With that, she excitedly says, "Let's start." The princess begins giving instructions to her team. Julia is to take the flour and sift it twice, 2 cups at a time. Alice is tasked with putting the butter in a bowl, adding sugar, and mixing it until it becomes white and fluffy. Artheria emphasizes that the next step is the most important. Alice must add the 3 pre-mixed eggs a little bit at a time, blending it all together. Finally, Miridii is to finely chop the sugar-preserved lemons for decoration, but she should leave about a quarter of them as round slices. Once finished, Miridii is to help Alice. The maids all acknowledge their tasks and begin chopping and mixing. Meanwhile, Artheria and Lilia work on buttering the pans. Artheria pauses to pluck one of the brandy-soaked fruits from the jar and pops it in her mouth, sighing that it's delicious. She reflects that the effort of stabbing the fruits with a fork to make holes for the brandy to soak in truly pays off, making them even more delicious. The first batch is ready for the oven. Artheria has prepared several different flavors: plain, lemon, honey, raisins, and black tea. As the batter is poured, the first cake comes out, but it's cooked all the way through. It's a bit burned on top. Artheria consults with the 2 assistants she secured to manage the oven. She suggests that the uneven baking is likely due to the cake's placement and asks if they think changing the position will prevent it from burning. The oven workers agree with the princess's assessment and say they will follow her instructions. Artheria thinks to herself that since she isn't using the oven, this is a good opportunity to train the workers, though she knows the final result depends on the oven and the workers themselves. She decides for the next batch to use a lot of the black tea she received, along with plenty of the brandy-soaked fruits. The next bake comes out perfectly, looking golden and delicious. Artheria calls for a break, asking Lilia to make some black tea so they can all try the cake. The maids eagerly thank her for the food. Miridii, Alice, and Julia all take bites, their faces lighting up with happiness. They exclaim that it's delicious and amazing. Watching them, Artheria smiles, thinking that this is the moment she loves most. She reflects that while she enjoys the process of figuring out and making sweets, her greatest happiness comes from seeing these smiling faces. Lilia agrees that it's truly delicious and is certain that even the crown prince will be pleased. Miridii even calls the princess a magician. Artheria notes to herself that pound cakes are often more delicious once cooled, but everyone has their own preferences. Lilia then asks about Sir Vixum and Sir Reyes. Artheria agrees that once the second batch is baked, they should invite the guards on duty to have some tea in turns. She also reminds Lilia to distribute some of the cake to the oven workers. The entire day was spent baking pound cakes, and after a few tries, the oven team got the hang of it. The last bake was the best of all. 2 beautiful, skillfully baked loaves, 1 plain and 1 topped with lemon slices, are set aside. Artheria decides these are the ones they will serve to His Highness. Altogether, they baked 30 cakes. Some were eaten right there, while others were set aside as snacks for the maids or as refreshments for the knights. The remaining cakes were stored either as hidden snacks for later or as the crown prince's personal share. After they finish, Lilia and Artheria stand before the workshop door, which is now secured with a heavy chain and a large, ornate padlock. Artheria can't help but comment that the security is surprisingly strict. Lilia explains that the strict measures are because the princess herself got angry. Artheria had said the worst possible thing would be for poison to be added to the food she was making. This makes Artheria wonder aloud, "Am I still a target?" Lilia quietly replies that she doesn't know. Lilia clarifies that her main concern isn't a direct attack on the princess, but the possibility that poison could be found in the food Artheria made. She wants to avoid the princess being suspected without cause, stating that they can never be too careful. To ensure security, Lilia has confirmed there are no secret passages and she personally double locks the doors and windows every time. Lilia explains the final security measure. The princess holds the keys to the entrance and the cupboards, while Lilia holds the remaining key. This arrangement means that no one can open the room without both of their keys. Lilia believes this should be sufficient. Artheria, meanwhile, reflects that she might have been a bit too carefree and not careful enough lately. Elsewhere in the palace, Cheyenne and Crown Prince Nigel are walking. Cheyenne suddenly stops, noting that he can smell something sweet, and cheerfully suggests they go visit the prince's wife. Nigel, looking nonplussed, just asks, "Why would I go see her?" Cheyenne is taken aback, asking if his elder brother seriously needs a reason to visit his own wife. Nigel, looking genuinely confused, says he doesn't understand what Cheyenne is trying to say. Cheyenne groans, calling his brother surprisingly inflexible and asking if he's being serious. Throwing his hands up, Cheyenne declares that he, the cute little brother, will pitch in and help his only big brother, but he expects to be rewarded for it. Nigel simply sighs and says that's fine, he understands. When they arrive, Lilia greets them with a bow, addressing both Cheyenne-sama and His Highness the Crown Prince. Cheyenne greets her casually, explaining that they were lured in by a sweet smell. He also adds that he has been meaning to greet the princess since her return to the capital. Nigel tells Lilia not to mind them and to be at ease, but Lilia apologetically informs them that the princess has become tired. Cheyenne expresses his disappointment. Upon entering the room, they find Artheria fast asleep, her head resting on the table. Cheyenne remarks that she might catch a cold like this and says they shouldn't wake her. He instructs Lilia to lead them to the bedroom and then tells his elder brother, Nigel, to carry the princess. Lilia starts to protest, but Nigel cuts her off, saying he doesn't mind. As Nigel lifts her, the sleeping Artheria feels a sense of warmth and a familiar presence. She vaguely thinks that the hands holding her feel gentle, even if they are a bit rough. Nigel, carrying her, quietly comments that she is too light and it would be best to fatten her up. Cheyenne immediately scolds him for being rude, reminding him they aren't talking about livestock. Artheria sighs in her sleep as Nigel looks down at her face, and his heart gives a noticeable bump. Just then her eyes blink open. Cheyenne laments that this is too bad, as he was looking forward to sharing the sweets she made today. He adds that she must really like sweets, just like him, because sweets soothe the heart. Nigel simply asks, "What is?" Lilia, standing by the bed, tells them, "It's here." Nigel gently lays the sleepy princess down. Lilia expresses concern, asking if it will be hard for her to breathe like that. As Artheria murmurs, "Is that so?" Nigel adjusts her covers, saying he will make her a bit more comfortable. He stands for a moment, looking at her sleeping form. He thinks to himself that it seems he has truly taken a liking to this girl, the way she is now. He then softly wishes her, "Good night, Artheria." Princess Artheria having a terrible nightmare where she has suddenly turned into a pig, complete with a pig's snout and ears. She looks on in horror as Crown Prince Nigel sits before her with a knife and fork, looking ready to eat. He looms over her, holding his cutlery, and tells her that if she doesn't fatten up, he cannot eat her, causing her to let out a terrified "Ek." Artheria then jolts awake with a gasp, sweating and looking terrified in her bed. She clutches her head, feeling a lingering warmth and remembering that she must have fallen asleep in the middle of her baking activities the day before. Just then, her maid Lilia enters the room, asking if the princess is finally awake. As Artheria sits up, she is surprised to find she is clutching something in her hand, a man's cufflink. Lilia smiles and explains that the person who carried the princess to her bed last night was His Highness, the Crown Prince. Artheria, holding the cufflink, looks concerned and asks Lilia what business the prince had and if it was troublesome that she was asleep. Lilia assures her it was nothing, and Artheria suddenly understands. Her horrible piglet dream was a direct result of the prince's comment about fattening her up when he was carrying her. Lilia clarifies that the prince's visit wasn't for any important business. He was merely accompanying the Giddis Archbishop, Cheyenne-sama. Artheria, who remembers that Cheyenne is Lilia's foster brother, asks why he couldn't have come to visit on his own. Lilia explains that the princess's residence is classified as the inner palace, which means adult men are restricted from coming and going as they please. Even as a clergyman, Cheyenne must have the crown prince's personal permission to enter. Lilia suspects that Cheyenne, who had greatly enjoyed the sweets from the other day, was simply lured in by the smell of baking and likely pestered His Highness into bringing him along. This story makes Artheria a bit interested in meeting this archbishop, and she wonders aloud if he looks more like the crown prince or his brother, Prince Alfred. Lilia just giggles, reminiscing that the archbishop was always incredibly fond of mischief and that the two of them were often told off together, especially for sneaking into the kitchens many times. When Artheria asks if he's a glutton, Lilia smiles and confirms that Cheyenne was indeed able to get the snack he had his eye on. Later, Artheria decides that simply complaining in her mind won't improve the situation, so she is taking on a new challenge as a first step. She has ordered breakfast from the official palace menu. Lilia nervously asks how it is, and Artheria, after taking a thoughtful bite, gives her full review. The yogurt and the jam are delicious, and the bread is passable, but the soup's taste is too weak. The salad is tasty but the eggs are overcooked, and the ham is covered in oil and far too greasy. She looks at the leftover food, wondering if the kitchen staff will eat it and if they don't also think it tastes bad. She reflects that she is blessed and not starving, which is the only reason she can criticize the taste. She asks Lilia if it would be alright to simply say the food is not to her taste, though she quickly clarifies she wouldn't call their skills bad. Lilia simply advises her to speak carefully to avoid causing any offense. Realizing she has a long way to go, Artheria decides on her plan. First, she asks Lilia to find out the Crown Prince's schedule for the day. She wants to return his cufflink, give him some of the pound cake, and ask if he would be free to have tea with her. Lilia agrees to find out immediately. Then, Artheria adds another request. She wants Lilia to get permission for them to visit the official residence of the Imperial Guards. Lilia is visibly confused and asks if the princess is planning to go in person instead of just sending a messenger. Artheria, looking determined, says she will go in person because she has something she would like to ask the count. This makes Lilia sigh. She smiles and says that while she is glad the princess is no longer acting like a doll, her new ability to make such rash decisions is also an issue. Artheria just smiles mischievously, thinking to herself that she is already restraining herself and is just playing the part of an innocent and helpless princess. Lilia pleads with her to please continue restraining herself, but Artheria just wags a finger and replies, "That will depend on the situation." The Crown Prince arrives to meet her for tea. Artheria immediately greets him and apologizes for having fallen asleep the previous night. The prince replies that it's fine and there was nothing particular to discuss, but Artheria instantly senses that he is in a bad mood. She notes that even though he looks the same as usual, she can tell from the subtle tone of his voice and his facial expressions, which makes her feel that her ability to read him is very much like that of a married couple. He gets straight to the point and says he heard she was hoping to go out. Artheria, internally surprised he agreed to tea so early just for this, confirms yes. She explains that she has a favor to ask of Count Sterzen, her new commander of the guard, who she notes is both a military man and a scholar who helped during the Alucia poisoning incident. She wants to ask the Count if he can find her a new private tutor, since her previous one, Professor Lehire, passed away some time ago. The prince asks if there is something specific she wants to be taught. Artheria, sitting at the table, says there are a lot of things, giving the example that she'd like to know how many types of cheese there are. The prince just repeats, "Cheese?" She enthusiastically elaborates, explaining she wants to learn about all the differences, from the milks used, cow, water buffalo, goat, to the textures, soft, hard, white, orange, and how the manufacturing methods, taste, and uses in cooking or sweets all vary. The prince, looking a bit confused, asks what she will do once she knows all this. Artheria, determined not to give up, explains this isn't limited to just cheese. She wants to know about the food characteristics of every region. She believes if they can identify crops that grow in barren northern regions, it could help people at least not starve. They could, for instance, cultivate sweet potatoes which grow in infertile soil, or find new crops like cacao, buckwheat, or wasabi. This would also allow regions that can't grow wheat to sell their own unique crops to buy it. After hearing her out, the prince nods and says, "I see. That's an interesting thought." Artheria continues, explaining that Dardenia is a vast and abundant country which is shown on a map. But because it contains so many diverse ethnic groups, the culture, customs, and mentalities are completely different in each region, leading to frequent disputes. She says it's the same for food like wine and tea, and while everyone probably says their hometown's version is the best, she thinks they all have good points. She clasps her hands passionately, saying she wants to know everything about this country, including its festivals and customs. She admits she doesn't understand difficult things like politics, but she wishes to teach these differences to everyone. She believes that if people could just mutually acknowledge each other's good points, it would be good, because the feeling of delicious is a universal experience. As she says this, she realizes that while she hasn't forgotten Japan, that life is becoming distant, like a dream. Dardenia is her country now. The prince nods at this, calling it a good attitude. He then gives her a small smile and comments that it seems she studied a lot about history before she lost her memories. Artheria is surprised but says she doesn't really remember those things. The prince replies that's too bad. She insists that enrolling in university isn't everything anyway. The prince then reveals a shocking truth. Really? He tells her that her knowledge of history and languages had already reached the university standard. He adds that if she had worked for another year, her knowledge of law would have also reached that level, and it wouldn't have been impossible for her to enroll. Artheria is left completely stunned, as the prince agrees with her earlier point that her studies weren't a waste and nothing was useless. Artheria panics internally, mentally screaming for Lilia, realizing the prince found out about everything. She wonders how he could possibly know about her secret studies. As she's reeling, the prince calmly sips his tea and states that he should know such things about his own consort. Artheria realizes he had been watching over her and was aware of her efforts all along. Regaining her composure, Artheria says that since she forgot, she can't be sure, but she doesn't think she had any plans to enter university. She had more important matters to attend to. The prince asks what could be more important. She looks him in the eye and says that being the crown princess was the most important thing to Artheria. She is His Highness's consort. It wasn't that she wanted to be a scholar, she just wanted to become a consort worthy of him. A note in the manga clarifies this is why the previous Artheria would sign everything, even private letters, only with her crown princess name, Artheria dis Dardai. The prince considers this and replies that while that may be true, there is no need for her to resist her urge to learn. Changing the subject, the prince gestures to the cake she brought and asks what it is. In a cute, simplified drawing he asks, "Pound cake." Artheria explains it's a baked sweet with alcohol that can also be a preserved food. He asks if it goes with black tea, and when she confirms it does, he says, "Then let's cut into it." As he moves the plate, she advises him to cut a thick slice. He cuts a piece and she encourages him to make it even thicker, explaining that the fruits and nuts won't be well distributed if the slice is too thin. He lifts the heavy slice, noting its weight. She explains it's heavy from all the brandy-soaked dried fruits. He then mentions that he eats dried fruit almost every day, as they are a type of portable provision. The prince takes a bite and as he chews, his eyes widen slightly. Artheria watches him, feeling a warm happiness in her chest. She thinks to herself that this is the expression she wanted to see. He is pleased and she's happy her baking suits his taste. After swallowing, the prince looks at her and says one word, "Delicious." He asks where she learned to make sweets, and she replies she learned from a book. He then requests, "Please make some for me again." Artheria is ecstatic, thinking her strategy to tame him with food has been a huge success. She beams and replies, "With pleasure." As the prince takes another bite, he suddenly calls her name, "Artheria?" She answers, "Yes," and he announces, "I will increase your guards." She looks at him in confusion as he reaches out and gently touches her face. With a serious, determined expression, he vows that he will not expose her to danger a second time, leaving Artheria staring back at him in shock as the volume ends. A flashback shows a young Cheyenne with short hair greeting Lilia. He waves and tells her that the sweets she gave him a while ago were really delicious, and Lilia responds that it is an honor. Cheyenne then holds out a cloth bundle filled with cookies, explaining that he brought some sweets given as alms by a tradesman in the parish, and he suggests they eat them together. Lilia asks if it's okay for her to have one, and Cheyenne invites her to help herself. Lilia takes a cookie and politely thanks him for the meal. As she eats it, she pauses with a thoughtful expression, finding the taste a bit weak and the texture unrefined. Cheyenne, however, just smiles brightly and waves his hands, cheerfully saying he'll pass on the taste test. Lilia simply thinks to herself that Cheyenne-sama is quite the gourmet. In another scene, Prince Nigel is shown looking at a loaf of pound cake. He observes that it's called a pound cake and notes how it keeps the shape of the tin it was baked in, which makes one want to carry it around. He then takes a bite, and as he chews with his eyes closed, he is overcome, thinking it is incredibly delicious. He continues eating, reflecting that he has never eaten a sweet of such fine quality before. He looks at the cake and wonders what Artheria is trying to get him to do by feeding him such a delicacy. Nearby, his attendant Phil Lin is reading a book titled Fake Cinderella Volume 2. Nigel, looking annoyed, tells Phil to stop getting carried away with his hoax and to just shut up and read the new volume. Later, Prince Nigel is shown holding the sleeping princess Artheria and announces that he must put her to bed. His brother, Cheyenne, pokes his head around the corner with a smile, playfully saying, "No." Nigel tries to slide away with the princess, asking if Cheyenne still needs something. Cheyenne quickly darts forward, saying that he wants to see her sleeping face. Nigel immediately turns his back, guarding Artheria from Cheyenne's view, and sternly tells him, like I would show it to you. From the side, Lilia just watches the two brothers, wondering what on earth they are doing. Princess Artheria is seen pouting, surrounded by floating images of chocolates. She thinks to herself that it has been a long time since she last ate chocolate. She sits at her desk, looking dejected as she tries to draw a picture of a chocolate cake with her quill. She sadly muses that it's not like she can just ask someone for it, and it seems that chocolate doesn't even exist in this world in the first place. She sighs and lists all the things she wants to eat, like chocolate cake, brownies, and chocolate fondue. Just then Lilia, who is always prepared, appears with a plate of other snacks, telling the princess it's time for a break. Artheria immediately cheers up, throwing her quill into the air and happily shouting yay. Lilia then picks up the paper that Artheria had dropped, wondering if it's one of the princess's scribbles. She looks at the drawing of a chocolate cake, which has a note, I want to eat it, and a partial list of ingredients. Lilia looks at the paper and understands that this is what the princess wants to eat. Another maid smiles, saying the princess will surely be delighted if she gets one. Sometime later, Prince Nigel is shown holding that same drawing. He looks at it, thinking to himself, this is... Artheria drew this. The next panel shows that he has had the drawing beautifully framed, and it is now shining on his wall as he admires it. Lilia later presents a covered dish to Artheria, announcing that it is a gift from Nigel-sama. Artheria is visibly surprised and excited, clasping her hands and wondering what the gift from His Highness could be. When the lid is lifted, however, it reveals a messy, smoldering, and completely burnt black lump on the plate. A little banner proudly proclaims it was made by His Highness. Artheria just stares at it in wide-eyed horror and gulps, thinking that her love for His Highness is truly being tested. A small image reveals that Phil was the one who secretly brought the disastrous gift from Nigel. In another moment, Prince Nigel is shown leaning very close to Artheria, causing her heart to thump. He looks at her intensely and vows that he will not put her in danger a second time. As she blushes and thinks he is too close, he gently takes a napkin and wipes her cheek. He pulls back, explaining that she just had some cake stuck on her face. Artheria becomes extremely flustered and waves her hands, yelling at him to stop because she isn't used to that kind of gesture. Princess Artheria wakes up in her bed as morning light streams in. She reflects on her strange situation, identifying herself as Artheria Lucian, the 12-year-old princess consort, while a memory shows her younger self standing next to the image of her past life, the 33-year-old Izumi Maya. Lying in bed, she looks out towards the grand castle, acknowledging that this is her new home, Dardenia. As she sits up in bed, Artheria thinks about her husband, His Highness Nadir, the Crown Prince. She knows he is 15 years older than her and is currently managing the entire country in place of the king. She recalls hearing from Lilia that he was kind and compassionate, but her own first impression was that he was a bit cold. However, she has also seen moments of genuine kindness from him, like his gentle, unforced smile, which she prefers much more. She finds herself wanting to know more about him. Her morning routine begins with a knock on the door, and Lilia enters with a smile, bidding the princess good morning. Artheria, who is now up, greets her in return. Two other maids follow, asking to be excused as they carry in a basin and fresh towels. As Lilia and another maid help her get dressed, pulling her gown into place, Artheria reflects that this process used to be embarrassing for her. While a maid brushes her long hair, Artheria worries aloud, saying it's troublesome that she can't remember all her manners. Lilia reassures her, pointing out that she has tea with the crown prince every single morning, and if there were any problems with her manners, the strict prince would have certainly mentioned it by now. Artheria still feels anxious, thinking that dealing with women is often more tedious than dealing with men. Just then, another maid, Yulia, enters holding an official letter, announcing that an invitation has arrived from Her Majesty, the Queen. Artheria immediately realizes the weight of this. Queen Yulia is her mother-in-law. The maids note that mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships are often difficult, and an invitation from the queen is an order that she cannot refuse. Artheria sighs, knowing they are right but feeling tired already at the prospect. Lilia then continues, saying, aside from that, princess. Lilia announces she has both bad news and good news. The bad news is that the crown prince is unable to have tea with her this morning. Artheria takes this in stride, understanding that he is the busiest person in the country and it can't be helped. Lilia then delivers the good news with a bright smile. His Highness would be very happy to have dinner with her instead. Artheria is surprised by this, and Lilia adds that the prince said if he's ever too busy for tea, having another meal with her is also fine. Artheria feels this has gotten her closer to the prince, but when the maids get involved, she's flustered, saying her current clothes are fine. The other maids instantly disagree, exclaiming that dinner with her husband is an intimate event, so changing is necessary. They insist that this is the first time they will have dinner together, making it the perfect chance to appeal to him. They even suggest a new, light-colored dress is perfect for the occasion, leaving Artheria to wonder what appeal they are even talking about. Lilia explains it's the appeal that the princess won't be a child forever, causing Artheria to blush and meekly agree not to go overboard. Privately, Artheria has a different reason to be excited. If she eats with His Highness, she'll probably get to eat delicious food, since they wouldn't dare serve him anything unpleasant. She also hopes that by sharing a full meal she can learn his food preferences, because during their morning teas, he just says everything is delicious. Lilia, overhearing this, asks if that isn't sufficient, and Artheria thinks not at all. Artheria is determined. She has cleared the first level of catching his stomach, and now wants to advance, making him crave her cooking at every meal. Lilia, who just wants to know what her ultimate goal is, brings the conversation back to the queen. She informs Artheria that the tea party is in the afternoon on the day after tomorrow, and she will handle the outfit preparations. This makes Artheria nervous, and she quietly asks if there's any chance she'll have to be alone with the queen. Lilia gently informs the princess that before she returned to the Crown Princess Palace, she was living by the queen's side. Artheria can only apologize, saying she doesn't remember that time. Lilia clarifies that the tea party is private but will include all the women of the inner palace, and then asks if Artheria is uncomfortable with the queen. Artheria reflects on this, and Lilia provides more context. She explains that this very palace had been deserted for a long time. When Princess Artheria was only 4 years old, a series of poisoning incidents occurred, which led to her being taken in by the queen for safety in the inner palace. The only reason the princess was summoned back to this palace was that talk had begun about the crown prince taking a concubine. Prince Nigel, however, flatly rejected this idea, stating that the topic only came up because his own consort was being kept away from him in the main palace, which resulted in her being returned to him. Artheria then recalls a serious conversation she had with the crown prince. He had told her that she has lived her entire life in the royal palace skirting death. He listed the tragedies. At first, things were just destroyed or disappeared, but then the canary she was raising died, a stray cat she was attached to died, and then a servant died as well. The final, terrible blow to her young heart was the death of her wet nurse, Mrs. Marlene, who had been a substitute mother to her. Lilia is shocked, asking the princess how she could possibly know about these things. Artheria, now shown in her pigtails, explains that His Highness told her everything. She reasoned that while most people would hide such dangerous information, he spoke to her at length, especially about the death of her wet nurse. He revealed the truth. Mrs. Marlene was murdered because she was mistaken for the queen, who was supposed to be in that room that night. Lilia confirms the story is true. On that day, the queen had a slight cold and, not wanting to pass it to the princess, sent Artheria back to the main palace after the evening meal. The culprit, not knowing about this last-minute change, attacked the room and killed the wet nurse by mistake. Artheria asks what happened to the attacker, and Lilia explains the aftermath was severe. The perpetrators were arrested and sentenced to death because the king flew into a rage that the princess had been involved. Lilia explains that while the king is usually a mild-mannered man, he makes an exception for the princess. His care for her is not ordinary. A flashback shows the king embracing a young Artheria. Lilia notes that the ringleader and his family were severely punished, having their territory confiscated and names erased, but the maid Julia, standing nearby, clenches her fist, saying that she also wishes for the culprits who murdered her own maid, Alicia, to receive punishment. Lilia continues, adding that after that incident, the king wanted to send Artheria back to the inner palace, but the crown prince stopped him. He apparently declared, "Artheria is my princess and not a woman of the harem." Artheria reflects on this, realizing her husband doesn't mince words and that she had previously misunderstood his curt tone. He had told her directly that the inner palace was not a suitable environment, as the women there get involved in worthless quarrels and blow useless things out of proportion. She recalls the empty, fake smile he used to give her, but she realizes he hasn't shown her that smile in a long time. On the contrary, his gaze when he looks at her now seems to hold a small bit of genuine warmth, a warmth she finds gentle and comfortable. She doesn't quite know what this new feeling is, but she is fine with it. Lilia, noticing the princess's expression, smiles and teases her. It seems you two have become quite close. She adds that as her maid, this makes her very happy. This causes Artheria to blush and quietly tell Lilia not to tease her. Later that evening, Artheria arrives for their dinner, only to be met with complete silence. She finds the crown prince smirking at a table laden not with fine dining, but with an array of portable military provisions. He informs her that since she was coming over, he had provisions for generals prepared. Artheria, standing in her fancy dress, is utterly shocked and asks if this is really their dinner, thinking to herself, "So that's your move." Artheria is mortified. She internally laments that she's an idiot for spending over an hour with her maids choosing a new dress, all for this. She knew he ate these provisions, but she desperately wants her feelings of anticipation back. She had been curious to try them after returning from Elzevelt, and she knows they include things like dried fruits, jerky, and even a can you can boil water in. As she's spiraling, the prince asks if something is wrong. Artheria just says, "I see." Nigel continues, holding up different packages and explaining that this way, there's plenty of variety, as every troop has a different supplier. With a deadpan expression, Artheria asks if he actually eats and compares them. He smiles, replying that he would get tired of them otherwise. Noticing he seems to be in a good mood, Artheria has a sudden idea and asks if he'd like to eat this meal outside. The prince questions her, "Outside?" Artheria eagerly explains that since the food is made to be portable, it would be easy to take with them, and she suggests they have a picnic. Nigel glances at the window, noting that it's cold and that going outside could bring all sorts of trouble. Artheria's face falls, and she quickly backtracks, saying they don't have to leave the castle, and that the garden or gazebo would be fine, asking, "We can't." After a moment, he simply says, "I'll go get a coat." Artheria is left looking confused as he pauses, then turns back to her. He drapes his own coat over her shoulders. As he fastens it, Artheria blushes, thinking, it's warm. The coat is huge on her, and she looks annoyed, thinking that it's just because she's so small. The prince smiles, explaining that it's something he used when he was a child, so there shouldn't be a problem with the size. He then suddenly lifts her into his arms and begins walking through the garden. Artheria immediately protests, saying she can walk by herself and there's no need to be carried. He doesn't put her down, simply stating that their strides are different and she doesn't know the way very well. Being held, Artheria blushes, trying to convince herself that she's only surprised and that the butterflies in her stomach don't mean her heart is swayed, insisting she's not at Sundara. As he carries her, she looks up at the sky and is suddenly shocked, asking, "There are 2 moons?" The prince just glances up. "Oh?" This new revelation is a shock Artheria hasn't felt in a while, and it reminds her she is truly in a different world. She asks if the moon is unusual, but the prince says he guesses so, as she hasn't been out at night much. He comments that the moons are bright, and she finally accepts that it's normal for there to be 2 of them here. While still holding her, the prince comments that she is far too slender. He says he can feel it when he carries her, and he worries that if he uses even a little force, she might snap. Artheria replies that she's just a small child with thinner bones and asks him to be careful. He promises he will, but he continues to fret, saying she's as light as ever and asking if she's eating properly. She insists she is eating, even snacks, but he just finds it surprising she hasn't gained any weight, adding that it's scary to feel like he might break her. Artheria thinks to herself that she's actually happy to be carried, as her line of sight is taller and it's fun. She admits that if she clings to him, it feels like being carried by her dad. She feels a strong sense of being protected in his arms, as if she'll be safe. She also admits, though she'd never tell him, that feeling his body heat is very reassuring. The prince smiles, agreeing that the garden has a different atmosphere at night, but then he teases her, saying she doesn't know what the town is like during the day either. Artheria confirms this is true, she has almost never been outside. She reflects that while the palace is large, it still feels like being locked up. The prince then says that since they're already out, they might as well go into town. Artheria is shocked, but the prince's expression turns serious. He tells her that he knows the palace is a cage to keep her locked up, and he knows this better than anyone because he's the one who built it. He then makes a promise, "One day, I will definitely get you out of this cage." He smiles and calls her interesting. Artheria, confused, asks if that's really a compliment. He insists it is, saying he doesn't know any other woman like her. She tries to dismiss it, saying she's just a child, but he looks at her and says, "No. You're an adult." This stuns Artheria into silence, and she wonders if he somehow noticed the truth about her. The prince clarifies, "At the least, the you after you lost your memories is..." As she's processing this, she just stammers that she doesn't remember much from before. He asks what's wrong, and as he pulls her into a hug, she just says, "Nothing." He then confesses something to her. He tells her that he didn't actually know much about the person she was before her memory loss. He only heard about her from reports and rarely interacted with her directly. When she asks why, he replies, "It was because I didn't want to face my sins." Artheria asks if he did something to her, but the prince clarifies, "I didn't do anything. That's my sin." He tells her he was responsible for her becoming an emotionless doll. He recalls a time just before she turned 8, when he saw her at his mother's place and noticed she wouldn't meet his eyes or speak a single word. Artheria thinks to herself that she had assumed she closed off her heart right after her wet nurse died. The prince continues, confessing that he hadn't even noticed her state until that moment. He admits he had no special liking for children and, above all, he was busy with his duties. He tells her that it was his negligence. Even if her suffering was due to politics, she was his consort, and he should have protected her. He was the only one who could, but he was negligent, and because of that she lost her emotions. He explains that he immediately wanted to take her back, but his father, the king, who had grown attached to her, wouldn't allow it. This forced him to arrange the talk of a concubine as a pretext to get her back. Even then, the king made a fuss, and Nigel only managed to quiet him down by agreeing to remodel her palace into a birdcage, raising the walls for her safety. He looks at her and clarifies that a cage isn't just for locking something in, it's also for protecting what's inside. Artheria, processing this, looks up at him with wide eyes and says, "I'll stay in the cage until His Highness says it's fine." "It's all right. I'm a coward anyway, so this is fine." This response completely stuns the prince, who can only say, before he starts to laugh. He laughs and tells her she really is an interesting person. He then says, "Well then, let's go to the town," and she simply replies, "Yes."